Hey, welcome back to my channel. This is Rhythm Shift and I'm back with another toy review. Today I'm taking a look at the Takara Tomy Transformers Masterpiece MP-28 Hot Rod KO version. So this is the KO version. And off the bat, I'd like to start by saying a few words about this figure because this was my very first Transformers Masterpiece figure, and I remember when Transformers Masterpiece first came out in 2000 and early 2000s. My brother got the early MP-01 Optimus, and I think he got the Megatron as well. At the time, I wasn't really collecting Transformers because I had not collected Transformers since the 1980s. And in the 1980s I had a few Transformers, but I was always a little bit disappointed in terms of their articulation. Like the transforming was fine and fun and all that stuff, but in terms of actually playing with them, I always like to be able to pose my action figures. So compared to something like Masters of the Universe, or even real Ghostbusters or G.I. Joe or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Transformers really were lacking in articulation. And also something that really bugged me in the 80s was the scale. The scale was all over the place. Like you had characters like Blaster who were bigger than Optimus Prime. Didn't make any sense to me. And another thing that bugged me about Transformers in the 80s is that I've already said the scale thing, that was a big problem for me, but also the lack of articulation. Although with that being said, I do love those vintage figures for what they are. I mean, I have a lot of love for the original Diaclone designs from the earlier releases of the Transformers. I love that because it's nice to see the history. I mean, I'm a big fan of toy history anyway, but to see the original concept and how it was taken and brought over to the West and rebranded as Transformers, it's all very interesting history. So I mean, I've got a lot of love for the figures in terms of collection pieces, but as toys, in terms of actually playing with, I never really enjoyed the Transformers as much as some other toy lines, unfortunately. Now I loved the cartoon. I always loved the cartoon, but I'll say this as well. As a child in the 80s, I also noticed there's things missing. Like, some things were just unexplained. I'll give you an example. With the original Optimus Prime toy, when I would look in his trailer, there seemed to be spaces for seats. Like, there were seats where you could position figures. And I thought to myself, but hang on a minute, I've not got any figures that are small enough to fit in those seats. Why the hell are those seats there? Or if you remember, in Prime's trailer, you had that little gun turret piece which fired the 2 missiles. You could open the cockpit, that blue part in his trailer, right? I looked at that and you could open the cockpit and I thought, well, shouldn't there be someone to sit in there? And there were no little minifigures. Now, and if you looked at Roller too, there were seats for people to sit in Roller. But I'm like, well, where the hell are the figures? Where the hell are the figures? It wasn't until many, many years later when the internet came around, in the early 2000s, when the internet was sort of more popular, that, you start researching things, and I found out that, okay, in the original Diaclone version of Optimus Prime, who was called Convoy, I believe, in Japan he was called Convoy, there were actually little, are they called Diaclone micro-change? I can't remember the name of them, but there were little spaces for figures. You got little minifigures to sit in these little parts, and they had magnetic feet. So basically, that aspect of the toy wasn't brought over to the West. So when I got, for example, toys like Optimus Prime, Ultra Magnus, I'll be looking at them and thinking, hang on a minute, there's spaces for things that don't come with the toy, and there's also alternate configurations that aren't included in the instruction manual. So that always bugged me a bit about the 1980s Transformers. But talking about this Hot Rod, right? Hot Rod here. I think it was around early 2018. No, let me go back. I'm giving you a little bit of history here. Let me go back. When MP-09 was released, back around 2009, 2010, I believe, MP-09 came out. That's when I thought, hey, you know what, man? These masterpieces are looking pretty cool. But at the time, I was collecting other toy lines, and I didn't want to invest into another toy line to start collecting at that point because money was a bit tight at that time, and I didn't want to start a toy line I can't complete. But I thought, you know what, man, HotRod looks cool, and HotRod is a favourite character of mine. Let me explain why. So, in the 1980s, when the original Transformers cartoon was airing, you know, I liked to watch it when I could. And then the movie came out in 1986. Yeah, 1986 the movie came out. And I was supposed to go to watch it with like my mum and my brother. Going to the cinema was something that we did quite a lot. So I grew up watching a lot of films, a lot of movies, and that's why to this day I have a big affection for cinema, films and cinematography, so on and so forth. But the day we were supposed to go and watch Transformers the movie, something happened, I don't know what. Either we missed the bus or we got there late, so we didn't get to see Transformers the movie. So I never got to see the film in the cinema, which is one of my greatest regrets. But after the film came out on VHS, we rented it, and I watched it. Now, prior to me watching the film, I knew a few things about it. I didn't know the whole plot. Nobody really spoiled it because I, asked them not to spoil it. Although Prime dying was a huge thing, you couldn't avoid that. Everybody knew Prime. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but we know what happened to Prime, right? And I was like, wow, I couldn't believe that would happen, because it was unheard of at that time. But a lot of people were talking about, oh, HotRod, he's so cool, HotRod. And I remember thinking to myself, who's this HotRod guy? Because I didn't recognise him from the cartoon, because HotRod's first introduction was in the movie. And when I started watching the movie, I remember thinking to myself early on, why is HotRod going to be promoted to the new leader? Why isn't it someone like a trusted soldier who's been on the job? Forgive me. A trusted soldier that's been on the job, jobbing away, like someone like Bumblebee, for example. Bumblebee has been loyal, he's been courageous, he's been all this stuff, but he wasn't made the new leader. That was my first thought when I watched the film. But when I got to the scene towards the climax of the film where HotRod is in Unicron's body and he meets Galvatron and he says, the Matrix. And Galvatron says it can't be opened. And HotRod says, not by a Decepticon. And Unicron basically says to Galvatron to destroy HotRod now, right? So HotRod starts fighting Galvatron. That's the moment when I fell in love with this character. Because we'd already seen the destructive power that Galvatron had when he took Starscream out, which was another huge thing for me back in the 80s, because Starscream was my favourite Decepticon. And if I'm honest, I was more upset when Starscream got taken out than when Prime got taken out, because I thought, well, there's always a way that Prime could be brought back because, he didn't get disintegrated. But Starscream, we know what happened to Starscream, and I thought, well, there's no coming back from that. Well, surprisingly, there was a way back for it, and I don't respect that. I don't respect the fact that they brought Prime back and they brought Starscream back. And I'll talk about that maybe in another time, but let's focus on HotRod. So I fell in love with HotRod at the moment when he started fighting Galvatron, because we knew how, at that point in the movie, you knew how strong Galvatron was, and we knew that HotRod wasn't the strongest Autobot, but he had the heart, man. He had the heart, which is why when you listen to the song The Touch, it's you got the heart, you got the emotions. It's about HotRod, man, because HotRod, throughout the film, yeah, he fucked up, right, in the early film by trying to tackle Megatron by himself. But over the course of the film, he learned from his mistakes and he grew to the point where, when it came time for him to face off against Galvatron, he put up a fight. And it was a fight that he probably couldn't win, but the fact of the matter is he fought. He wasn't bitch made, he didn't like turn tail and run or pussy out of it. He stood his ground. And the moment when Galvatron is choking the life out of him and HotRod seizes the Matrix, boy, that was the point where that cemented this character as my favourite, one of my favourite Transformers characters. And ever since then I've always thought fondly of the movie, because it's the movie that took Transformers to a whole new level. It introduced a spiritual aspect into Transformers, and Transformers was already quite a complex psychological character study. I mean, maybe I should do videos talking about this stuff, because I'm talking about it now. It's very interesting, but it elevated Transformers to a very spiritual level, and that made it resonate with me even more. Now, unfortunately, the toys, they couldn't do that, because as I said, the scale was all mixed up. Some toys just looked like shit. They were all plasticky, whereas the original Diaclones had die-cast in them. But as they went into 1986 onwards, they stopped using as many die-cast parts, so the toys started to look a lot cheaper, and then it got a little bit lost. You know, they kind of lost the essence of what made Transformers cool. So it faded out after season 3. I know it continued in Japan, but that's another story for another day. Point of the story is this: around 2009, when MP-28 came out, I thought that looks cool, but I didn't buy him. But in 2018, one day, must have been in January 2018, I was thinking about Transformers the movie again, as I often do, and I thought, man, it really would be great to have a figure of, even if I just have one figure of my favourite Autobot. Let me see if there's a good HotRod available. So I started looking online. I found out that there was this MP-28. I thought, oh, okay, that's cool, but I'm not prepared to pay the prices that Hasbro are asking for it. Then I found out that they do KOs, and I found a website called TF Direct. I thought, you know what, let me take a chance on this KO. So I bought him, and I got him, and I fell in love with him, and this started me collecting Transformers MPs. So this is the figure, and that's the story of how I got into it, right? Because now finally I have a HotRod who I can put in the poses that I would have always loved to have gotten him in as a child, but I couldn't. So there we go. So that's the story of how I got into Transformers MP. So let's talk about this figure. Now, first of all, I want to point out that I've added some Toy Hacks decals to this, so he doesn't look like this when you get him out of the box. So I've added the flame sticker here and on his shoulders, these reflective parts on his crotch piece, and also the leg parts to make him look like the G1 toy HotRod. So that aside, let's talk about this figure. So this for me is just the perfect HotRod. Let's talk about how tall he is. So he stands at about just under 7.5 inches tall, which is a great size for Autobot. Let me just do a little quick size comparison here. Bear with me. So I'm just going to put two other characters in here just to give a sense of scale, because scale is very important for me, particularly with Transformers. And now it's all good, man. I'll show you how it's all good and how it's all worked out. So I'm going to put my MP Smokescreen in here next to him, who's another Autobot warrior. There we go. And you can see HotRod, he scales pretty well with Smokescreen. I mean, the Nissans are slightly smaller, but not so small that it's a major difference. I think that's a great contrast. Here he is next to the big boss himself, Optimus Prime. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Optimus fan. I know I said HotRod is my favourite, but everybody loves Optimus. If you don't love Optimus, you don't like Transformers. But the problem with me is that sometimes in order for a character to grow, another character has to step aside. And when they kept reviving Optimus Prime, it didn't give HotRod enough chance to develop into the hero he could have been if they'd have written the show a bit better. But nonetheless, let's zoom up a bit. Right, look, HotRod stands that tall, and Optimus is around a 10-inch scale, and that's great because, you know, Optimus is in his prime form, so HotRod isn't in his prime form, he's just HotRod here. Not Rodimus. So I think that's a good size contrast. So that's that. Back to the HotRod. Let's talk about HotRod. Let's take Prime out of the mix. So as I was saying, something that I really love to do with these Transformers MPs is to combine them with Lego Friends and Mega Constructs. So if I put a Mega Construx custom me, so here's me, now I can interact with the Transformers in my play patterns. Yeah, I'm a grown man, but I still play with these toys. If I didn't play with toys, what would be the point in collecting them? So now I've got a HotRod that scales perfectly with me in terms of, you know, that, and also I can combine other toy lines such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they scale perfectly with me and with the Transformers. So it's like I'm building my own little, I've constructed my fantasy world of my dreams through these figures. So that's pretty cool, man. So let's talk about HotRod himself. So this is the KO version, and there's some advantages to getting the KO, because there's a problem with the chrome paint on the original Takara Tomy release. Over time, this chrome paint flakes away. Now that's an issue that was corrected on the KO. So I've had this for 2018, 19, 20, 21. Nearly about 3.5 to 4 years I've had this figure, and the chrome is just as good as the day I bought it. So, and also it was a fraction of the price. You know, so that's another cool factor. So let's talk about HotRod's articulation for this MP. So he can look left and right, up and straight ahead. Now there was a problem with this figure. When I got him, this neck part in here, that was actually a red colour. So if ever you lifted his neck up like this, it would look kind of silly because it was the same colour as his helmet and it broke up the colour scheme. So I actually painted that myself, so it looks a bit better now. So you can look around like that. Shoulders rotate 360. You can go outward that far. He has a double hinged elbow bend. He can swivel at the bicep like that. He's got a waist rotation. No ab. Well, he's got a bit of a bend forward for ab crunch, like that. Legs. If you lift up this flap, they can go straight forward that far. You can kick out to the sides. If you lift up the flaps there, you can do the perfect splits, like so. He can kick backwards if you lift up the rear flap that far. What else can he do? On the knees, he's got upper thigh rotation. Knees are double jointed, so you get a great deep bend there. And the feet, you've got a forward and back and a slight pivot on his feet. So that's your HotRod for you. And when I got this figure, I was like, wow, this is it, man. I've waited, what, how old was I in the Transformers? 7, 17, 27, 37, nearly 30 years for them to make Transformers toys that I can really get behind. Now, I know they did some versions of HotRod before the MP line, but they just never appealed to me. You know, when the MP scale is perfect for me because they feel the right size in my adult hands. As you know, as a child, the toys felt the correct size. As an adult, they feel brilliant for adult hands. So that's covers his articulation. Let's talk about his accessories. So he comes with a few pieces. He's got a fishing rod, so you can recreate the fishing scene from the start of the movie. He comes with his two blasters, just like the vintage G1 toy. They're shaped and sculpted just to reflect those. It's brilliant. He also has a cutting blade. Let's get that out. For when he rescues Cup from the where they crash in the sea, and the song's playing called "Nothing's Gonna Stand." Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Do do do. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. That song. And then he also comes with something else which didn't come with the original release. But first, let's talk about his cutting blade. So here he's got his blade. It spins nicely. What you can do now is you can take these guns out of his hand. Let's take his guns out for the moment. And what you do is you close the fist, open this flap, you can tuck the fist in, and it comes with this circular port here, like that. Now you can connect the cutting wheel to that port, and there you go, you've got it's perfect. Now you can be fighting that giant robotic sea squid thing that was tormenting Cup in the movie, and that looks really, really cool. It looks a lot better than the cutting blade that came with MP-09. This is more in scale. So that's that. And he has one more accessory which you don't get in the Takara Tomy official release. So let me talk about that. The extra accessory is this. If you open up his chest, you'll find the Autobot Matrix of Leadership in diecast too. So this is a diecast Matrix which came with the KO version, which doesn't actually come with the official. So believe it or not, the KO version of MP-28 Hot Rod is actually superior to the Hasbro Takara Tomy release because it fixes the chrome wear issue. You get a diecast Matrix too. So you're getting more bang for your buck essentially, and you're paying a lot less. So as I said, TF Direct is the place to go. They recently had these back in stock. I'm not sure if they've sold out now. I recommended it to a friend of mine who's also into Transformers MP collecting. He managed to order one. But I don't know, maybe they'll get them back in stock because getting KOs is a little bit... Around 2018, KOs were everywhere, but they're a little bit more harder to find these days. So Hot Rod also has another gimmick, or play factor I should say. If you lift up his helmet, you can actually take his visor out. Let me just take this out. It's a little bit tricky to turn it over. Right. So this visor is just a bit of clear translucent plastic which goes over his eyes like this, and you can have him doing the scene from the movie where he spots the hole in the shuttle at Lookout Mountain with Daniel, and I think he looks really cool, man. I mean, Hot Rod is just... I know Jazz is cool, but Hot Rod's cooler, man. Yeah, so there's my boy Hot Rod, man, looking sharp. So I suppose I should address the elephant in the room. Some people say Optimus Prime was killed by Hot Rod because, you know, Hot Rod tried to intervene in the fight and it ended up costing Optimus his life. I'd like to say this. Hot Rod didn't kill Optimus. Optimus killed Optimus. Because if Optimus didn't stand around trying to find reasons to show mercy on Megatron, maybe Optimus would still be alive today. And I say that even more so after having read the Marvel comics, because in the Marvel comics, Prime was such a pacifist, at least in the early issues, and it kind of got a bit sickening because there was a situation where Shockwave was raising hell in the Marvel comics, and Prime clearly had an opportunity to finish Shockwave, but Prime didn't do it. Prime never had what it took to actually finish characters off in the G1 cartoon, at least. I know they changed that for the live-action Michael Bay films, but I don't really acknowledge those films as Transformers. But in my own personal universe, I've got my own storylines going on, and yeah, Prime... If Prime had listened to Cup, he'd still be around, because what did Cup say? Finish him off, Prime, do it now. But Prime didn't, and we know what happened. Not to spoil it for anybody. But anyway, Hot Rod learnt from that mistake, and that's what makes a hero. It's about how you overcome things. It's not about, oh shit, you fucked up and oh, I'm just a loser forever. No, he fucked up and he learned from his mistake, and by the end of the film, he became what he became. But again, I could talk for hours about that movie and about, you know, character studies and so on and so forth, but this is supposed to be focused on this toy. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get him transformed, we're going to take a look at him in his out mode, and then I'm going to do some side-by-side comparisons of other versions of Hot Rod, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so here we are back once again, and we've got Hot Rod in his out mode. So here he is in his car mode, and I think this is a really, really good rendition of Hot Rod. I mean, he looks the part. As you can see from the front, he looks just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And going along to the sides, the chrome is still looking good. This is a figure I got in 2018. Both sides, chrome's perfect. On the back, these decals I added from Toy Hacks, and this is how he looks from the underside. Now, there is one thing I will say about this. One thing I've noticed is that over time, I noticed that there's a slight fracture line in the clear plastic, because when you transform him into robot mode, his arms peg into this port here, and it seems like the stress from that has caused this very, very fine crack to appear from here down to there, and it's the same on both sides, same point, same exit point. Now, unfortunately, clear translucent plastic is the most fragile type of plastic, so that can be a factor. Now, to me, it doesn't matter too much, because I can live with that, and I'd rather have the port secure in robot mode than have the ports slightly loose with joints falling out of place. So I can live with that. It's a bit of a shame, but it's just a question, it's just a factor of the tolerances that were used on this figure. So I can live with that, it's fine. He doesn't roll that well because there's parts of his body that drag on the floor, sadly, but he looks fantastic. Now, if we do a quick comparison with the original Hot Rod toy, which is here, the original Hot Rod toy is one of the best rolling G1 Autobots ever. I mean, just listen to that, it's so smooth. So smooth, it's really, really nice. It's a shame that they have never really been able to come close to matching the original's rollability, but as I say, I can live with it. I'm glad he looks like he does in the movie. Let's take a look at another Hot Rod. Just recently I reviewed the Studio 86 Hot Rod, and here he is in out mode. And does he roll well? See, even he drags on the floor. Come on, man, what are you doing, Hasbro? What are you doing to Takara Tomy? Once upon a time, the whole point of these toys was to be good cars and shitty brick robots. Well, I shouldn't call them shitty brick robots, but let's be real, man. The articulation wasn't really there in the 80s. But, so, let's do this correctly. This is a bit... Right, so it's MP-28, 1986. Studio 86. I've got another Hot Rod. MP-09. So, MP-09, does he roll? Again, no. Dragging his ass on the floor, sadly. But with MP-09, I don't really see him as a Hot Rod. I see him more as a Rodimus. But I like the idea of Rodimus. Let's zoom out a bit. Let me put these back a bit. I don't really see him as a Hot Rod. I see him as more of a Rodimus Prime. But I like the option of Rodimus Prime being able to change back into the sports car, and also being able to change into his what do they call them, Winnebagos, slightly caravan type thing. So he could be a triple changer. At least in my universe that I'm creating, Rodimus Prime can be a triple changer. So there you have it, generations of Hot Rod toys, and MP-28 stands out as one of the better ones. I mean, MP-28 and MP-09 are certainly my favourites. I mean, Studio 86 is okay, but he looks a bit truncated on the nose. And you can't really fault the original, because the original's the one that started it all. But yeah, MP-09 looks good in robot mode. Forgive me, there's some phone ringing. Okay, sorry about that, the phone was ringing. What was I saying? Yeah, MP-09's great. And MP-28's great. Now what you can do is you can actually lift up his engine part, I think. I think you can attach a gun in there, let me see. It's a bit tricky to get open. Yeah, you can attach a gun in there. So if you've got the other version of Hot Rod, I think it's the MP-40, can't remember, but you can attach his Target Master in there if you wanted to. I don't. If you flip that back, you can attach a gun into Hot Rod's front. If you've got his Target Master, that would be cool, but I don't have the Target Master, so I won't be doing that. I prefer the colours on this Hot Rod to the Target Master version, and I'd rather have two of his vintage guns as you got here, rather than a Target Master. So yeah, he looks good in out mode, and he looks good in robot mode. I mean, this is a beautiful figure, man. And as I said, this is the one that started it all for me, to get me into MP Transformers. Now what I want to do is I just want to quickly talk about Hot Rod's bio, because you know, storyline's important to me, and sometimes it gives a little bit of character when you actually talk about the character. So here's Hot Rod's tech spec from the 1980s. It says his function is a cavalier, which basically means a knight. My actions speak louder than my words. That's his quote, because, you know, the Transformers had so much personality, and that's what separated them from other robots such as the GoBots and so on and so forth. So it says, HotRod is an all-American Autobot. He's the typical adolescent who dreams of being heroic and important. He tends to follow rules too closely, and although he means well, HotRod's impulsive actions often get him into trouble. He carries 2 photon lasers, so I guess that's what those are, 2 photon lasers, and I think Optimus Prime's gun is called a photon eliminator, if I remember correctly. So it says he carries 2 photon lasers that temporarily electromagnetize an enemy robot's microcircuits. Speed 120 mph, range 4 miles. He can be hot-headed, but he is always well-meaning, an admirable lad, and a brave and honourable fighter. He's shown himself to be a brave and honourable fighter in the climax of the 1986 movie, which is what made me fall in love with him so much. So, in terms of his tech specs, he's got... See, this is the thing, they fucked up on the 80s tech specs for HotRod because they gave him Optimus Prime's tech specs. HotRod shouldn't have these stats. For example, HotRod shouldn't have a 9 in strength, because if he had a 9 in strength, he'd have been able to fight against Megatron. He's got a 9 in intelligence. No, forgive me, he has a 10 in strength. Boom. As I said, these are Rodimus' specs. 10 in strength, 10 in intelligence, 9 in speed, 10 in endurance, 10 in rank, 7 in courage, 10 in firepower, and a 10 in skill. So, as I said, HotRod should have had lower stats in his HotRod mode, and those stats should really apply to Optimus Prime, because Optimus ultimately ends up having the same score as Optimus. Because what I like to do is I like to work it out. So let me just do this here, if I can find it. Bear me a second. See, because one of the things I love about Transformers is seeing how they all fit together in terms of like rank and order and functionality, you know. So I keep a little database of the scores. I'm just opening it here because I love that sort of military aspect where, okay, this guy serves this function and that guy's the officer over that. So HotRod, yeah, it says altogether he's got a total score, if you add all his stats up, he comes to 76 points, right? Optimus Prime, if you add all of his stats up, also equals 76 points. So there's no way in hell HotRod should have the same stats as Optimus Prime in HotRod mode, because if he did, he'd be as strong as Prime when he's HotRod, and that's not how it works. So they kind of fucked up on his tech spec a bit, but you know, it is what it is, and we can live with it. So let me get him back to his robot mode, and then I'll give some final thoughts on this figure. Right, back once again. So here we have HotRod transformed back into his robot mode, and there's something I want to point out. I don't know if you can see it too well on this camera, but when you transform him, there is a tendency for the paint to sometimes chip on his nose and on his chin. Don't know if you can see that there, ever so slightly. So frequently I've had to touch this figure up, you know, with paint, just reapply a small bit of paint on the chin and on the nose. In order to prevent that, what you can do, or what I usually do and what I should have done, is taken a cotton pad, and usually I put the cotton pad over his face when I'm transforming him, and that stops the paint from rubbing away, which is a little bit annoying, but hey, it's not a big deal. It can easily be fixed if you've got some model paint. So here I have a Matrix, and as I said, he comes with a die-cast Matrix which feels very solid, very strong, and you can put that in his hands and he holds it very well. Here we go. So you can actually have him holding the Matrix if you position it correctly in his hands. Tighten that up. He can hold it very well. Like that. So let's get the camera straightened out. There, you see, HotRod can hold the Matrix perfectly fine. If I tap his arms in correctly, I don't think he holds it too well if you tap the arms in fully, but we'll see. Arms in, arms in. Yeah, you can hold it. Just adjusting it a bit. Forgive me. Yeah, you can hold it just fine. Yeah, if his arms are tapped in properly, you can hold it just fine. And that Matrix also fits in his chest compartment, which is great. Take it out of his hands. Then we just put it in here like so. And he's got storage for the Matrix. And that's secure, it's not going anywhere. So that's where I like to store that. He can, the fishing rod accessory, you can hold it very well. But for that you need to untap the arms again and fold his legs. If you want to recreate the pose from the movie, you take that there, this here. I don't think he does need to untap his arms, his hands. Forgive me, I'll just position this correctly. So you can have him seated. Just adjusting it. You can have him seated, ready to fish with Daniel, if you want to. So you could pose him with the fishing rod. Just move that down a bit. So that's cool. Fun accessory to have. Now I wanted to do some comparisons actually, size-wise. So, well, not size-wise, but just overall look-wise. We're going to start off at the beginning, right at the start. Original HotRod. Over here. Then we're going to put in the order that I got them, I guess. Do you want to do them in the order I got them? No. We're going to go to Studio 86 next. There. Then we're going to have our masterpiece, MP-28. Yeah. Now, this is a good figure, but it's not masterpiece quality. Now, I've heard some people online, there's a particular reviewer, I don't remember his name of his channel, but he always has a tendency to say, and this is a mini masterpiece, and this is a mini masterpiece, just mini masterpiece, mini masterpiece. No, this figure is not a masterpiece. You know, when you're dealing with a masterpiece, there's a different feel. There's usually a different feel in terms of the build quality. The plastic on this is good, but it feels toy-like. This feels a bit more masterpiece-ish. As you can see, there's no chrome on this one. Like his arm lasers, there's no chrome, it's just grey plastic. So you get chrome on the MP. You even got chrome on the vintage. You know? So there's little things which elevate the figure above and beyond these, what do you call them? Legend scale, chug scale, I don't remember what they're called because I don't collect them too much. But this is a whole other ballpark, man. I mean, there are great things about that figure, don't get me wrong, but this is my HotRod. This is the scale, the build, everything. This is where I'm at, man. If I was collecting these Transformers, it might be a bit more cost effective, but it just wouldn't be ticking the boxes that I personally feel I need as a toy collector. Now I'm going to bring in one more so-called HotRod, but I don't really see this figure as a HotRod. It's really a Optimus Prime, at least in my collection. Here we have MP-29. This is the reissue MP-29, which fixed a lot of the design faults of the original. So basically he's a lot more sturdy and not prone to breaking. You know, the original MP-29, if you looked at him funny, the thing would break. Apparently, I never owned it, but I was fortunate to get the reissue where they fixed a lot of those faults. Now, with this figure, as you can see, he's much taller, so I'm going to have to move the camera a bit. Let's get these ones to the side. Oops. Old Hot Rod took a fall, but he takes a licking and keeps on ticking. So let's move this over here. Right, now we're talking about the MPs. See, MP-09 to me is Optimus Prime. MP-08 is HotRod. Move the camera up a bit so you can see MP-09, and that's great, man. That's exactly what we want in terms of scale progression, in terms of HotRod's growth. Just move these aside. So with the MP-09, you can do something with this. You can change his faces. So what they were trying to do to Karatomi is they're trying to put a HotRod and a Rodimus figure in one. So you could change his face. This face I prefer is the younger looking one. Right, that's the HotRod face they call it. But to me, this is Rodimus for me, man. His other face, which you pull this up, you pull that down. That's what they call the Rodimus face. But it's just very long and miserable looking. Nah, that's not Rodimus for me. Rodimus is a young blood hothead. So there, that's my Rodimus. So I'm very happy to have both these figures because they both serve different functions in my masterpiece collection. You know, I've got the early stages of Hot Rod's life and his more mature Optimus Prime form. So yeah, I'll just put this on a rotation and we'll give some final thoughts. Okay, so that's my review of the Transformers masterpiece MP-28 Hot Rod KO. So what are my final thoughts on this figure? Well, I absolutely love this guy. Look, man, I have to put myself in the shot here. Let me put myself in the shot. If he stands, he stands. Well, I absolutely love this guy. As I said, this was the first masterpiece figure I ever bought, and this got me into MP collecting big time because as soon as I got this, I thought, this is it, man. This is exactly what I've been waiting for, was it 20 years, 30 years? Probably 30 years, yeah. Because as much as I love this old school Hot Rod, I never actually had him in my childhood. I bought this in 2014, I thought, because I always wanted a Hot Rod, but I never got one. So to have a version of Hot Rod which is modern articulation, modern sculpting in this size, it's just perfect for me personally, perfect. And I fell in love with this figure straight away, and I thought, you know what, man, I've got to get more of these MPs. Fortunately, as I said, KOs were still quite prominent back then, so I was able to get a lot of my figures as KOs relatively easily. The site I like to use predominantly is TF Direct. Great place, I can't recommend them highly enough. I've been shopping with them ever since 2018, and every order has been fulfilled. And I've only ever had one item come where the packaging was damaged, and obviously that's not their fault, it's the postal service's fault, but the figure inside was fine, and I still use them to this day. Now yeah, he got me into the MP line, and that's a line that I think I'm really happy that I got into, because as I said, in the 80s Transformers, I loved the cartoon, I loved the mythology, I loved everything about it, but the toys were fun, but they always felt lacking in terms of articulation, because with action figures such as He-Man, you know, I was used to being able to make him sit down or move his arm above his head, you know, or turn his waist. With G.I. Joe, you could get into crouching poses, sitting poses, running poses, whatever you want. Likewise, when Ninja Turtles came along, they had the improved articulation on the MOTUC template. Not the same butt, but the same template, except they used instead of O-rings for the legs, they used plastic. Yeah, articulation was always very important to me in my play patterns. Now, as an adult, articulation still matters to me. I mean, the same things that appealed to me as a child, you know, scale, articulation, sculpt. These things now are being put into Transformers to the point where I'm like, yes, this is it. This is what I always wanted. As a 5-year-old child, this is what I would have loved to have played with. Now I'm an adult and I have my adult collection. This guy is the one that sparks it all off for me, for the Transformers at least. So yeah, can I recommend him? Yeah, but not highly enough. I'm just a, you know, as I said, I've got a lot of love for this character, and I've got a lot of love for this toy. So if there's anything negative I'd say about it, well, sometimes the paint chips on the face during transformation, like when you put him into car mode, his nose can sometimes rub in the paint chips. Okay, that's a downer. And also I told you that the clear plastic had two thin stress lines going through on each side where the arms peg into the body. Again, that's a tolerance issue. It's not through, you know, neglecting the toy or mishandling the toy. That's just, sometimes these things happen, man. You know, sometimes when you get toys, there are design flaws. Now, I'm not going to complain, because if any of you are into Masters of the Universe Classics Roboto figure, that figure, the clear plastic on that, man, it was so faulty that the figure practically disintegrated. Now, I'm in the process of trying to rebuild that figure, because Roboto is one of my favourite characters in all of Masters of the Universe, and it still hurts me to this day that they released a faulty figure in 2010, which was prone to breakage, and they never reissued the figure with that issue corrected. So, I'm in the process of trying to fix that. But yeah, otherwise, nothing to complain about on this figure. It's all good, man. And as I said, with the Toy Hacks decals, it just makes him look even cooler. So I hope that review has helped you if you're deciding whether or not you want to add this figure to your collection. And as always, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Feel free to check out my other Transformers videos or any other toy lines that I'm into. I do reviews on TMNT, G.I. Joe, Transformers. I'm going to soon be doing some Masters of the Universe classics. I know that toy line is no longer prevalent, but Masters of the Universe is such a huge part of my toy life that I think I need to do some time, spend some time talking about that, because of all the toy lines I've ever collected, Masters of the Universe was the one, my favourite. So I know you got some Mattel, they're redoing the Masters of the Universe vintage figures with some crazy ass shitty looking sculpts. What are they called? I can't even remember, don't pay attention to it. But there's also the Masterverse figures, which also I'm not interested in. But when it comes to the classics or vintage Masters of the Universe, yeah, I'm all in. Well, for the most part, I'm into the figures I like. But anyway, that's enough for now. Yeah, hope you've enjoyed the review. Thanks for watching, and on to the next one. Take care for now.